Would you believe that your spouse could betray you without you even knowing? Jack had been living what seemed like the perfect marriage until one afternoon during a lunch break, a stranger sat next to him and dropped a bombshell. She claimed his wife, Lauren, had been having an affair with a man she knew all too well, and shockingly, that man was her husband. Could you ever believe such a thing? What will Jack do as his world unravels? The truth will be revealed in just a moment. Before continuing the story, tell me which city you are watching from. I want to know how far this video has come. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so I can send you exciting stories like this every day. It was your regular Friday. I got up, showered, dressed, and headed to work, where I had a number of meetings and negotiations. When lunchtime came, I gazed out the window at the sunny Dallas afternoon and decided to go across the street to the gallery for some dinner. As I went through the mall with Potbelly, I smiled, understanding how much of a slave to habit I had become. Over the last year, I've probably walked this route 3 times a week to eat the same sandwich at the same location. This would not have been true when I was younger. Then I craved diversity. Now that I've discovered something I actually enjoy, a little repetition isn't an issue. Okay, perhaps even a lot. I just started my first mouthful when a woman took the seat next to me. This grabbed my attention for 2 reasons. First, there were several vacant chairs at the table. Second, I chose this location because when I sit, the next seat is extremely close. This usually means I can have my lunch without interruptions. This closeness did not appear to disturb this woman, so I began to get a Coca-Cola, cola, and chips. As I did this, she added, "You do not have to move anything for me, Jack." I turned to have a better look and observed a woman around 170 centimeters tall, weighing around 54 kilos with olive skin, shoulder length, light brown hair, and large soft lips. But her bright brown eyes drew my attention. Not because of their hue, but because they appeared so sad looking into those eyes. I inquired whether I knew you. She gave a sweet grin and shook her head. "No, we'd never met before, and honestly, I wish we hadn't. What do you say to a beautiful woman you've never met who sits next to you and clearly recognizes you, then says she wishes you two hadn't met?" I had no idea, so I simply stared at her silently. She extended her hand. I apologized for my harshness. "My name is Amanda Holmes." We shook hands professionally, and she went on to say, "I won't take up much of your time, but I need to talk to you about something that concerns both of us." Turning away from Amanda, I involuntarily looked around, hoping to see friends laughing at their own jokes, but no one turned back to her. I told Amanda that I don't know you and can't comprehend what you would require from me. Maybe I should simply leave. As I started to put the half-eaten food back into the paper bag, I felt it faintly touch my hand. "Please give me 10 minutes, Jack, and then I will leave you alone." I should have ignored the stranger and walked away. Damn. Looking back, I should have turned and run as quickly as possible, but I didn't. Instead, I stopped fumbling with my meal and turned to face her. "Okay, you have 10 minutes. I also pressed the timer on my watch for added drama. She stared at me, took a deep breath, and slowly continued. "Jack, my husband has been seeing another woman behind my back for 6 months, and that woman is Sue, your wife." The words came to me plainly, but I did not trust them and told her so. "Amanda, I'm sorry that your spouse is cheating on you, but you mistook me for someone else. My wife loves me, and I love her. We've been married for nearly 15 years, and I'll bet my life that I'm the only man she's ever known." Amanda's eyes grew sadder with each word I spoke. She withdrew a fat brown envelope from her pocketbook without looking and placed it in front of me, saying, "I am truly sorry. I understand this is difficult for you to take, but I guarantee you that the other woman bears your Sue stamp." She holds the envelope with her index finger. As I grabbed for the envelope, she explained that it contained images, a DVD, and a private investigator's report. She placed her hand on my arm. "Please, Jack, do not watch this until I am gone. And my recommendation is to wait till you've had a few hours alone before seeing any of this. It will take some time to analyze the items, but it will take far longer to recycle." At this moment, I was half angry, half bewildered, and partly terrified. So I said, slightly louder than necessary, "Lady, what the hell is this? So what do you want from me?" I noticed her blink at my tone, but she did not look away. Jack, I've already told you that your wife is cheating on me with my husband. What do I want from you? Yes, Amanda. What the hell do you want from me? Jack, I honestly don't want anything from you but forgiveness. Amanda, I'm confused again. Why should I forgive you if your story isn't pure nonsense? She began to stand up. She said, I've given you all the information you need to make your own decisions about who needs your forgiveness. But let me tell you what I wanted from this meeting. First and foremost, I wanted to personally deliver this news to you. I owe you that. Second, I want your wife out of both Matthew's and my lives. As she rose to depart, she leaned down and whispered to me, I really believe Sue loves you, so please try to respond in a way that you can live with rather than merely reacting to the pain. This was the most difficult thing for me, but I hope it will change everything. As she began to walk away, I grabbed her hand. What will you do about your unfaithful husband? She flashed me a frigid smile and firmly stated, I'm going to run into him on Sunday. After that, he will have a week to convince me that he would never cheat on me again, and we will leave town by the end of the month. Otherwise, I will deprive him of his reputation, money, and manhood. When I heard the emotions in her remarks, I recognized her spouse was in serious difficulty. While I was deciding whether to follow her, she disappeared into the crowd. Turning to pick up the envelope, Amanda's voice came into my thoughts, and I understood that I would have to wait until privacy at work. I couldn't open the envelope, so I spent the longest day of my life moving from meeting to meeting, mechanically carrying out my tasks. My mind and heart were not focused on business. Finally, my last meeting concluded, and I went home. Please comment number 1 so that I can know that you liked the video and subscribe to our channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you very much. When I arrived home at 6:30 p.m., I set down my briefcase and entered the bedroom, where I noticed Sue watching television. When she spotted me, she leaped up, hugged me close, and kissed my lips. This is how she has welcomed me every day since we married. She looked at me and smiled, saying, You're early today. What happened? Well, the weatherman stated the weather will be excellent for the weekend, so I figured we might travel to the lake early tomorrow. We can go fishing, then I'd put down fresh tile in the hall. She said jokingly, That sounds fun, but I can't do it tomorrow. Why, honey, do you have a date with another man that you cannot cancel? Hitting me softly on the left shoulder. She smiled and remarked, That is such a terrible charge. You know, I volunteered to help with the church's annual auction, so I'll be busy all day. Now apologize. I sought for evidence of lying on her face but found none. I hugged her firmly and apologized. After dinner, I put my fishing gear in the car, along with a duffel bag containing work clothes and gloves. After everything was packed, I went back inside to watch some television. Later that night, I had difficulty sleeping since dinner kept coming back into my mind, and the flood of emotions repeated itself. Around 1 a.m., I found Sue clinging to me, and I pondered how this had transpired without my knowledge. I felt her hands start to move towards my penis. Are you awake? She whispered in my ear. Yes, I mumbled. Too tired to sleep? Too tired to sleep. She laughed. Is it like being too sleepy for sex? She tried to make love, but nothing happened since she was afraid she'd cheat on me. As I slid onto my side, I wondered, what the hell is going on? I awoke this morning and everything was good. Now a stranger claims that my wife is a cheater. Still awake at 4 a.m., I gave up, got ready, and went to the lake before departing. I stared at my sleeping wife and wondered what was going to happen to us after a few hours driving. The only interruptions were a gas station stop and a visit to the McDonald's drive-through window. I arrived at the lake house. This house is where I have some of my first recollections, assuming you trust the stories. My grandfather designed and built this house with his own hands. My father told me it took 20 years. Even years after my parents' deaths, I still expect them to greet me at the door with a grin and a hug. And every time it doesn't happen, I'm slightly disappointed. Driving through the gate and along the dirt road, I noticed a house that was modest by modern standards. In addition to the standard living room and kitchen, the house featured 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a game room, and a wraparound porch. But what set this house apart was its position on 320 acres near a lake. As I drove there, I noticed how quickly the sun would rise over the hills, and my grandfather's house seemed like my little Shangri-La. After rapidly unloading the car, I got a carton of orange juice from the refrigerator, opened the screen door, and approached the white rocking rocker. I decided that regardless of what happened later, I would begin the day by watching the sunrise. Remembering that morning, the sun produced a stunning image, bringing the hills and lake to life. I was lost in its peaceful beauty. The next thing I recall is waking up to a half-empty carton of warm orange juice on the porch and the sun already high in the sky. After a few minutes of silent muttering, I decided it was best if I rested before doing what I came to accomplish. Keep it in mind. I pulled a liter bottle of water from the chest and an envelope which I threw on the dressing table. I brought them both to the dining room table where I sipped water and considered the envelope. To hell with it. I took the damned envelope and pulled out another envelope with a 2-page note attached to the top. Jack, I'm not sure what I'll say when I give you this. I apologize if I repeat myself. My name is Amanda Holmes, and my husband, Matthew Holmes, has been dating your wife, Lauren, for the last 6 months. The second packet contains an edited copy of my private investigator's report, images, and an edited DVD. I've organized this content so that you can ponder before acting. I realize it may be too late, but after this letter, take some time to reflect on how much you love Sue and what she has meant to you over the years. I can guarantee you that the affair has ended and no longer jeopardizes your relationship. Now you should concentrate on the questions. Can you forgive her? And are you willing to battle for your marriage? Please do not open the second envelope until you have the answers to the above questions. No man can avoid witnessing clear evidence of his wife's cheating. But because this is my hope, I am responsible for convincing you that it is true. So you won't have to open a second envelope. I witnessed the start of their relationship. Actually, I was the reason they met. It began at the Enigma Club. Matthew let his ego speak for him, jokingly saying that all the females wanted him, bored of his boasts. Finally, I offered a bet that I could find a woman who didn't want him. He agreed, and I picked your bride. Why? Because I spotted her on my prior visit to the club. She proudly wore her wedding ring, came and departed with her companions, and refused to dance despite numerous men's advances. I was confident that she would quench his ardor. After placing a bet and selecting a target, I moved to another area of the club and waited for my humiliated husband to find me. 2 hours later, I discovered him sitting alone with his wife. I introduced myself, and after the initial awkwardness, everyone relaxed. The turning moment occurred 30 minutes later when my husband recommended Sue take an illicit substance within minutes of her first refusal. Matthew convinced her to try it. When I realized Matthew would win the bet, I took the tablet as well. I will not go into all of the details. Boots. Who came home with us that night? Perhaps it was the combination of drink and illicit substances, or simply the knowledge that we were all being so obscene. Whatever it was, it proved to be an extremely intense experience. So much so that when Sue asked the next morning if she might go clubbing with us that night, I declined. However, if she drove home quickly, packed, and returned immediately, she could stay the entire day. She only departed for an hour and remained with us until Thursday afternoon. She needed to leave in time to prepare for your return the following day. When she departed that afternoon, I was quite thrilled. Matthew and I just had a great, sensuous week, and we enjoyed a one-time experience with a very special woman, a woman who impatiently awaited the return of the man she loved the most. You, Jack. 2 months later, I discovered a pair of soiled underpants that were not mine. After Matthew failed to provide a sufficient explanation, I hired a private investigator. 2 weeks later, they confirmed his defection, and I directed them to gather as much proof as possible. A few weeks later, when I looked through their early images, I was surprised to see Sue. It did not make sense to me. I knew Matthew was capable of cheating, but the way Sue spoke made me believe she was really in love with you. So I asked the investigators to learn whatever they could about her. Where does she live? Where does he work? Is she after money? Did her husband recognize her? Does he understand what is going on? Have they separated? After several months, detectives were able to answer all but one of these inquiries. I still don't understand why she did it. According to the report, whenever you went on a business trip lasting a week or more, Sue visited Matthew every day, always stopping the day before you returned. Some of these meetings lasted 30 minutes or less, while others lasted the entire day or night. Given my early engagement in this matter, you would have expected me to concur with this. Believe me, I don't. I loved the first week. It was fantastic for me as a woman and wife, but it was an event we shared with Lauren. What they have done since then has not included me, and I find this reprehensible. Despite my rage at Matthew, I realized how much I still adore him. He deeply hurt me, but I feel we will get over this as husband and wife. I'll run into him on Sunday, but I'm confident he'll decide to stay with me. The decision will be difficult for him because I will seek my payback, which will encompass a great deal of suffering and humiliation. However, it will be limited to what he forced me to go through. I'm writing this letter for 4 reasons, and the second envelope has evidence. The first is to inform you of the problem, since if I were you, I would want to know. The second step is to supply you with all of the evidence you will need if you decide to leave your wife. The next step is to invite you to seriously assess if your marriage is worth fighting for before making any decisions. These goals have now been met. Jack, be extremely careful what you do next. Make sure it's exactly what you want. My fourth motivation for all of this is to plead for your forgiveness. I understand that my participation is unacceptable. I don't have any excuses. I recognize that what I did was wrong, and I understand that the daily anguish and humiliation I experienced were the direct result of my own acts. You, on the other hand, are the innocent victim of our collective judgments. I truly apologize and seek for your forgiveness. That is all I wanted to say. I'm not sure where you'll go from here, but my investigators have reported that you are a kind and decent person. I trust you to make the proper decision. Amanda Holmes. After I finished reading Amanda's letter, I stood up and grabbed a can of beer from the fridge, opened it, and drank it in 2 sips. It was not only invigorating, but it also offered me something to focus on when my mind began to wander. Can I trust Amanda? What woman would come up with such an idea? She must have the incorrect Sue. Damn, Sue would never go to bed with them. 2 years ago, I shared a fantasy about the same thing. She freaked out, claiming she would never share me or sleep with a woman since it was filthy. Her reaction was so powerful that I never brought up the matter again. Damn, this is not correct. Amanda's detectives made a mistake regarding her marriage. This is the only viable response. Ironically, I had to accept Amanda's remarks at face value. I had to spend the afternoon reflecting on my life with Sue and the future I envisioned for us. Instead, I did exactly what she said I should not do. I got a bottle of Jack Daniels from the bar, took the second envelope, and walked over to the couch to open it. I should have listened to Amanda. Inside was a lengthy private investigator's report outlining names, locations, times, and sightings. That is who did what and how much they enjoyed it. But I didn't finish reading it. Instead, my attention was pulled to the 8x10 photographs that fell into my hands. Each one was precisely dated and time-stamped. Each could be described as a high-definition image, and each of them clearly revealed my wife. Although the photos in Ohio portrayed diverse dates and occasions, they all shared some qualities that none of the photographs did. Can I see the man's face? But in each shot, I could see the wedding ring I had placed on Lauren's finger. Seeing these photographs crushed my heart. But there was another shared characteristic that pulled me down. You can see in every photograph, my wife's look was one of sheer, unadulterated joy. She was overjoyed. After that, I drank some, but not as much as you might expect. After a while, when all of the images were spread out on the floor in front of me, I started the DVD. Watching this was quite disheartening. For the most part, the video was less detailed and crisp than the photos. Furthermore, the shock value was no longer present. Yes, the video proved this bitch cheating in every way possible. Yet seeing it left me feeling empty. After a long time, I returned everything to the envelope and placed it back on the dresser. Then I crawled onto the bed and started crying. I cried uncontrollably for quite some time. At some point, I remembered the last time I lay on that bed and felt dreadful. I was a freshman and felt terrible since my girlfriend had left me for a junior with a driver's license in an old car. Mom and Dad allowed me to wallow in self-pity all day Saturday until they returned from church on Sunday. At this point, Dad approached me and said, "That's enough, boy." He informed me that life is difficult and unfair, so don't be surprised when you get kicked in the buttocks every time. I recall looking at him and asking what I could do to relieve the pain. He grabbed my shirt and literally dragged me out of bed before answering, "Son, you have to understand that the rains will come. They can provide magnificent harvests or trigger floods. When there is a flood, you can only complain. It means facing the reality and doing your best. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and if feasible, assist those less fortunate than yourself. You do this every time a storm comes into your life, and regardless of the outcome, I am pleased to name you my son. A few minutes later, I was seated at the dinner table, sipping bottled water and contemplating whether my marriage could be saved. After an anxious hour, I realized that this was not the case. I could go through virtually anything. It wouldn't be easy, but I believed that with her aid, my love for her would carry me through. Unfortunately, there was one situation. Sue's actions were the outcome of a series of events. I knew she had done with him several times before, which she had always denied me. Taken together, this meant I'd never be able to forgive her. I couldn't forgive her because she'd given herself more completely to another guy in the last 6 months than she had to me in the previous 15 years. Realizing that a difficult decision had been made, I began to consider how to handle the divorce. I knew I wanted to present it as a done deal, rather than go through a long series of debates and legal battles. So I took a blank sheet of paper and began making a list of everything I needed to do. Find an attorney, bank accounts, credit accounts, find a place to live while protecting as many of my assets as possible from divorce. Looking at the final list, I realized I'd need at least 2 or 3 months to get ready. As I drove home that evening, I started to worry about convincing Lauren that everything would be fine for the next 3 months. In the midst of my anxiety, I had a thought that caused me to laugh, softly and ironically. After another mile of walking, I pulled over to the side of the road and added one more item to my to-do list: party planning. I put the car back in gear and resumed driving, laughing aloud. The following 3 months were more than eventful. I coped by concentrating on what was important, preparing for divorce and life afterward, keeping Lauren and the party's lives as normal as possible. A week later, I was able to find a good lawyer. From our first meeting, I knew he was exactly what I needed. I told him I was looking for a lawyer who could file a divorce based on Lauren's infidelity and maximize my share of the marital property. I told him that once she received the documents, I never wanted to see her again. He was concerned that this would add unnecessary complications, but I assured him that it was required. Finally, I wanted him to find Mr. and Mrs. Holmes and sue them for severing family ties. Amanda was correct. It was unforgivable. I wanted my fair share of justice too. Before I left his office, he had made a significant advance and introduced me to a financial advisor who specialized in preparing men for divorce. The first time I met with a new advisor, I gave him a list of all my assets and liabilities, and he spent 40 minutes asking me questions when we met a week later. He had very good news and a detailed plan for protecting my assets. At the next meeting, I signed a power of attorney and told him to carry out the plan. This included closing my retirement accounts, transferring funds from joint to individual accounts, and moving money abroad. The sale of the family's lakefront home was critical to this strategy. It turned out his estimate was incorrect. The house sold 45 days after going on the market, with the net price nearly 50% higher than his best-case scenario. Now I won't have to worry about my bills. My initial plan was to set up a 2-bedroom apartment to live in after I left Lauren, but given my new financial situation, I decided a more drastic change of scenery would be necessary. A week after the money from the house arrived in my account, I booked a cruise around the world on the Queen Elizabeth II, and an ocean view cabin with a balcony cost me $37,025. But I'd always wanted to travel the world, and now was the perfect time. Key 2 left New York, and I'll be back in the same city in 4 months. Unfortunately, the Key 2 did not set sail for 3 months after the party. It took me another week to plan a relaxing wait for the cruise. Pretending that everything was normal was, as you might expect, the most difficult task at first. I started returning from the lake house at night. I had to consciously look into her eyes and smile. I believe the only reason I got through that first week was because of the sex. I refused her request, so whether she hated it or not, I didn't care. I also tried to limit my time at home. My profession always required travel, but given my age and position, I only had to travel 1 week out of 6. However, for the next 3 months, I was on the road 3 out of 4 weeks and began staying on weekends, something I hadn't done for a decade. When Lauren inquired as to why business travel was increasing so rapidly, I explained that 2 employees had retired and that until we hired and trained replacements, I would be collecting a lot of bonus miles. I turned away from her. I couldn't help but wonder if she would have asked the question if Mr. Holmes was still available. Over the span of 3 months, I spent several nights at home. After the first month, I stopped trying to initiate sex with her, and she took the initiative, but I couldn't manage it. At first, she was very understanding, but then she started asking what was wrong. I chalked it all up to stress at work. After the 4th unsuccessful case, I informed her that I would schedule an appointment with the doctor, and we would find out if the pills were as good as people stated. For the party, I reserved a modest banquet room at the International Hotel in Addison. I chose it because it was the ideal size for 60 people, featured 2 55-inch TVs on each of the 4 walls, and had a separate media control room on the 2nd level. I invited all of my friends and family to a surprise party for my wife to celebrate our 15th anniversary. The invitation also mentioned that this was an adult-only gathering. 52 persons have confirmed their participation. I want to make this a wonderful evening for everyone. Our anniversary day arrived, and I awoke my wife with a delicate peck on the cheek as she began to rise. I wished her a happy anniversary and set the breakfast tray in her lap as she sipped orange juice and ate small slices of toast. She grinned and commented, "You're such a good cook. I believe I will retain you as my husband for a while longer." Instead of informing her that she no longer had this option, I smiled back and ordered her to hurry up because the visitors were about to come and she needed to get ready. Lauren was astonished an hour later when I let in her best friend Allison. She was even more astonished to see a limousine at the door. I took out a huge bag from under the chair and gave it to Lauren. Lauren asked for me and the bag was stuffed with present wrap. I kissed her on the cheek and replied, "Yes, Lauren, oh, for you." I then informed her that Allison would join her at the Golden Age Spa. She had an entire day of self-care ahead of her. The only thing I requested was that she dress in the new clothing I just gave her and be ready by 6 p.m. Allison will bring her to me once the limousine has returned. I told her that I was not kidding. She kissed me and walked out to the little moving truck came into my driveway. An hour later, everything I wanted to bring with me was packed and shipped to storage. It wasn't much, mostly images and childhood recollections, some tools and clothing. When it was finished, I felt terrible that after 15 years, I wanted to leave so little. I got at the motel about 5 p.m. and talked for 15 minutes with Dave, the man who would operate the media booth. I handed him a CD of his music that he could begin playing at 5:30 p.m. There's also a DVD. I gave him $1 and informed him that as soon as he received my text message, he should begin playing the DVD. I also cautioned him that others would eventually start yelling at him to turn it off. He stated that for an additional $1, he would ensure that he was deaf until the end of the playback. "Good guy," I remarked, handing him another $100. By 6 p.m., everyone had come, and I individually thanked everyone for joining me on this memorable evening. Looking through them all, I realized 2 things. First and foremost, they were all Lauren's family members or friends who became part of our family and friends. I realized I'd spent my entire life focusing on Lauren and her world. I promised myself never to make this mistake again. The second conclusion was that they were all nice people that I would miss in my life, as befits her 15th anniversary. Sue donned a very short black dress adorned with hundreds of Swarovski crystals, which glinted in the sun and highlighted her deep cleavage and 36C breasts. 4-inch stilettos mixed with a short skirt revealed glimpses of her stocking tops as she moved. Looking at her, I realized she was the most beautiful and sexiest woman in the world, and the only woman I'd ever truly loved. As she entered the room, everyone who loved her greeted the reunion with spontaneous clapping and well wishes. She was clearly astonished by the attention, so I gave her a moment to take it all in before approaching her. After a quick kiss, I turned her to face the tables and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, my wife of 15 years is Lauren." For the next hour, I played the role of the joyful spouse, going from table to table with Lauren and praising everyone for their participation. Later, when the food and desserts had been finished, I grabbed everyone's attention and presented Lauren with an anniversary gift. It was a 15-inch crystal heart on a platinum chain that she wore around her neck. I said it, and now she wears my heart. She had no idea that I had ordered this heart specifically for her. Crystal hearts are easy to find. However, I discovered that making one with a substantial break is quite tough, which is precisely what she now possessed. She now carried a broken heart, just like mine. Lauren told the crowd that I kicked her out of the home so quickly this morning that she didn't have time to bring my large anniversary gift, as she handed me a simple white envelope with the hotel logo on it. She explained to the audience that she didn't come to the party without a gift. As everyone watched, I removed a handwritten message from the envelope. My beloved Jack, you have made this day full of lovely surprises, so I hope my gift is equally amazing for you. I've always refused you my anniversary present. Tonight, when we get home, I would gladly give it to you. Love, Sue. After reading the note, my face turned red. Everyone noticed and chuckled, recognizing my wife had just given me a pretty dirty present. Lauren actually laughed at my reply. What they didn't notice was that I was blushing. Not humiliation, but rage. Here she is on our anniversary, offering me a gift she no longer cherishes. She offered me a secondhand gift that someone else had previously used till he grew bored of it. I agreed with others' misconceptions and smiled as I pretended to carefully fold the message and place it in a secure location. Everyone appreciated this as it sparked a new round of laughter and exclamations. When my watch read 2040, Lauren was sitting at a table in the main part of the room, conversing happily with 3 of her friends, while I paid my respects to her aunt and uncle, who were sitting very close to the exit. At 8:45 p.m., I fled the ballroom through the hotel's back entrance. I sat in the back seat of the limousine and turned on the laptop that was ready for me. After connecting to the hotel Wi-Fi, I texted Dave to start playing the DVD. Sitting in the limousine, I watched as the video camera in the media control room displayed images on my screen in real time. My primary goal at the gathering was to present this video. After all of the work and money spent planning this event, I was determined to witness its impact. It began with an empty champagne glass and a single clink from a silver knife delicately tapping its sides. Attention, please. I'd like to request your attention for a moment. My voice resonated throughout the room. Sound system. Following a little delay, my voice resumed. I had to leave the room for a bit, but that was fine because I left my virtual self here to dedicate this to my lovely wife, Lauren. I observed as everyone sat down and focused on the neighboring screen. Lauren accepted me as her husband 15 years ago today, and I took her as my wife. At the time, I thought I was the happiest person in the world. I suspect you still see me that way. As my voice continued to play, photographs from our first 14 years of marriage came and melded on the screens. Lauren assisted me in becoming a better man and husband throughout the course of the first 14 years. We learned what makes each other sad and how to make each other laugh for better or worse, wealthier or poorer, sick or healthy. Lauren prioritized me over everyone else. She was my ideal match, partner, greatest friend, and lover. Aside from her affection, Mother offered me numerous gifts over those first 14 years, but there were 2 that I always cherished the most. As I continued to speak, the screens displayed comparable images. The first of these gifts was a wedding band. Since she stood at the altar and placed it on my finger, I've worn it with pride every day. Please pause for 2 seconds. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support is a great inspiration and encouragement for us. Thank you very much. I must admit that with all of the travel required by my job, there have been many lonely nights, and I have been offered the comfort of a temporary companion on several occasions. But I've always refused, not because my requirements were smaller than those of other guys, but because this ring served as a daily reminder that I had everything I needed right at home. When I return, the second most memorable gift is a Mont Blanc pen. Lauren presented it to me on our 10th anniversary. She explained that she had ordered it the previous year and that it was one of a kind. If you look attentively, you'll notice that instead of one floating, the diamond at the top of this model is suspended with 2 stones that appear to be facing each other. My stone is a heliotrope, and underneath it is an emerald stone. Lauren, I've loved this pen from the first one. I adored it for its originality, but most of all for the care that went into its design and creation. Over the last 5 years, I can honestly say that every time I use this pen, I was reminded of the woman who gave it to me and how much it means to me. A champagne glass emerged on the screen. This time it was being refilled. My fingers seized the stem and proceeded to lift it out of sight while my voice remained audible through the speakers. Join me in toasting my wife, Lauren, who taught me what love is. The screen showed the empty glass being lowered back onto the table. I just told you about my treasured recollections from the first 14 years of my marriage to Lauren, but today is our 15th anniversary, and I have to tell you that this has been the most incredible year yet. Lauren has given me 2 additional presents this year that I will never forget, and I'd want to share them with you today. The first was a gift of surprise and amazement. This was the second gift she gave me this year. An old Viking helmet came on screen. You see, this year my lovely wife gave me horns to wear, as you can see. They were large and heavy. At this time, I noticed the older males in the audience become more intrigued, though most still had no idea what was going on. After much deliberation, I determined that these horns were too heavy for me, and everyone in the ballroom watched as the horns were filed down one by one on the monitors. Eventually, only the mutilated helmet remained on the screens. Everyone here has been friendly to Lauren and me. Over the years, we have experienced many joyful moments with Lauren, whom I adore, and to all of you. I wish that your life is full with happiness, that satisfaction will be a constant friend. Lauren, and to all our friends, I say this with pain in my heart. Go with God. As the displays went dark, I noticed a lone figure stand up and walk towards Lauren. I witnessed him speak to her, and after she confirmed her identity, he removed 2 plastic bags from his pocket and placed them in front of her. The first included the remnants of a destroyed Mont Blanc pen. I observed her take up the second bag and tried to figure out what it was based on her reaction. I realized when she discovered that these were 4 independent portions of my wedding band. I smiled at the thinking that no one would notice it was absent from my hand. Finally, he took out an envelope from his pocket and informed her that she had officially gotten the divorce papers. Lauren followed him as he walked hurriedly towards the exit, calling after him as the monitors turned back on. My final tale was brief, severe, and grim. How would you react if this were your wife or husband? And as raw photographs of Matthew Holmes and Lauren emerged on the displays, I believe Lauren recognized how much I valued her anniversary gift because she fell to the floor when she saw the up picture of herself. The party was just what I had hoped for. I closed my laptop. I tipped the driver 30 minutes later and arrived at DFW Airport's Terminal C after an hour and 3 glasses of whiskey. I was in the air. I spent the next 3 months in the Florida Keys renting a beach house and swimming or snorkeling every day. The 4 months I spent with Key 2 were fantastic and well worth the money. Watching the globe on television is one thing, but witnessing its wonders firsthand is something else entirely. In terms of companions, an unusually big proportion of the passengers proved to be fascinating individuals, making every meal worthwhile. There were few single women on board and even fewer single guys, so I always had company at lunch, on the dance floor, and when I went ashore. In those 7 months, my divorce was finalized, and thanks to great legal and financial counsel, I was able to keep the majority of our previously joint assets. Of course, images and movies were very helpful. There were 2 surprises during this period. The first was that Amanda and Matthew resolved my lawsuit for $500,000. The second happened 5 months after the celebration. My lawyer contacted me and informed me that Lauren would agree to all of our requirements as long as she could speak with me in person. The lawyer strongly advised me to do this. I resisted, stating that I would not meet her, but would agree to a 15-minute video conversation. So on the scheduled day, I found myself in the ship's conference room, looking at Lauren for the final time after she had said hello. I deliberately began the countdown on my watch and stated, "You have 15 minutes." She spent 10 of them describing how she had made a huge mistake, how stupid she was, and how it would not happen again. I just stared at the television, remembering how her lips tasted, how much she enjoyed kissing, and how much I missed her. She spent the last 5 minutes imploring me to come home. When her time was up, I asked my lawyer if I had met my commitments. He exchanged eyes with Lauren's lawyer before saying, "Yes, Jack, you complied." "Okay," I replied. Then I glanced straight into the camera, knowing that Lauren assumed I was gazing directly at her. "Lauren, I gave you all I had, and I assumed you gave me everything in return. However, when I saw you with my lover, I knew that I had never had you all. Seeing you together reminded me that you shared more with him than you ever did with me. After a little pause, I said, Lauren, I've spent my whole professional career negotiating agreements, and one of the reasons for my success is that I've always attempted to make fair deals. I've always searched for a contractual arrangement in which both parties gained as much value as they contributed. Given this, do you think I could accept a relationship in which I gave my all while my partner provided less? She dropped and shook her head before rising from the chair. I answered, me too. She raised her head and asked Jack, why did you stop calling me Sue after all these years? Tom, this is from the air. I sat down again so she could see my face, then replied, Sue, the wife, was waiting for me at home. She was the one who took pleasure in being my friend and mistress. Lauren is a cheat. When I noticed tears pouring down her cheeks, I stood up and said farewell to Lauren and Sue. I hope you enjoy that story. Here is another one. The doorbell rang. Kendra checked her watch before getting up from the couch and immediately went over to answer it. He had arrived early. Then again, this is typical Patrick behavior. He was always the first to arrive. When she opened the door, her jaw fell in amazement. Wow. Hello, Patty, she replied, giving him a short glance. She had to overcome the urge to gaze at him freely. She'd grown accustomed to seeing a melancholy, depressed Patrick in recent years, so she hadn't expected this. Patrick was dressed beautifully in a blue button-down blazer over a white shirt. Khaki-colored pants complement his formal and relaxed style perfectly. He was perfectly combed and clean-shaven, with the exception of a clipped mustache and beard with a streak of sagebrush. His hair, which was dark with silvery strands, was cut and styled as if he had gone to a salon, rather than getting a quick trim in front of a mirror. He looked fantastic, remarkably similar to the man she'd fallen in love with almost a decade before. Hello, Kenneth. Patrick responded with a genuine smile on his face, gazing behind Kendra to catch a sight of the house he used to share with his former wife. He inquired, is Jessie ready? Kendra rolled her eyes and smiled. No, not yet. She's been primping for a few hours, preparing for your, date. Patrick couldn't help but giggle at this. He shrugged and joked. Well, she's our mother's daughter, Kendra chuckled as she poked him in the chest. She felt some hardness under the button that held his shirt's collar in place. It surprised her slightly. She didn't recall his chest being this firm. Come to think of it, his clothing fit him differently. Her eyes returned to his, confirming her assessment. His tummy did not bulge above the waistline of his jeans, and his shoulders appeared wider. Has he worked out? So may I come in, or are you going to leave me standing here like a Jehovah's Witness? Patrick inquired with a happy smile on his face. Kendra had a quick return to the present. She was perplexed by her enigmatic thoughts, but she swiftly returned to her senses. Yes, of course you may come in, she replied with a somewhat sheepish chuckle. You are always welcome here. I mean, you are still paying half of the mortgage. It was meant to be a joke. Unfortunately, it only served as a reminder of their year and a half apart. Patrick was making partial payments on a house he did not live in. On top of that, he still had to pay for his modest apartment, which was approximately 10 miles distant. Kendra mentally chastised herself for her oversight. After a year of arguing, using past hurts as weapons, and firing insults like grenades, the two of them had agreed to a ceasefire. It was not quite peaceful. More likely, they were wounded soldiers who were tired of fighting. There's so much blood, so many casualties. Their agreement was tenuous, but both were careful to avoid issues that could spark an emotional outburst. On the Western Front, things were tranquil for the time being. Kendra stepped aside, allowing Patrick into the house. He entered, sneaking past her. Her nose caught the aroma of aspen, his favorite cologne. She instinctively closed her eyes and savored the familiar aroma. Patrick went across the living room unconcerned. He gazed about, seeing how things had altered from what he remembered. For the most part, things were just as he remembered. Same furnishings. She had selected it out herself. Same curtains, exactly the same setup. There were a few differences, though. First, there were 3 gleaming blown glass animal sculptures. One showed an elephant, another a reindeer, and the third a horse standing on its haunches. They were lovely and looked barnsly. Patrick had never seen the painting on the wall before. It hung above the largest, most ostentatious change in the living room, a 70-inch ultra-high-definition television with curved screen. Patrick picked up an elephant figurine from the coffee table. The tusks were either gold or gilded. Regardless, it was stunning. "It's pretty," Patrick expressed appreciation. "So where did you acquire it?" Kendra immediately tightened. She stammered slightly as if caught off guard. Finally, she stated it was from a small art store. "Really? Where is it? Perhaps I'd want to purchase a few of these for my place." She grinned, but it was a nervous giggle. Taking it from him and returning it to the table, she muttered dismissively, "You probably don't know. It is slightly out of the way." Her discomfort was obvious now. She avoided making eye contact with him, tucking her hair behind her ear. Kendra only did this twice when she was flirting and avoiding something. Patrick realized what was going on right then. His mind drifted back to the 2-year-old text messages he discovered when he learned of his wife's affair. One of their shared interests was art statuettes and paintings. These weren't just random items she'd purchased. They were gifts from him. The King Kong TV was undoubtedly a present from the small store down the road, which was most likely closer to his house. He lived about 2 hours away. His prior residence now has a different appearance. Everywhere he looked, Sean's urine streaks marked his territory. He was effectively separated from his family. The only indication that he had ever lived here were a few images of himself, Kendra, and Jesse posing for family portraits. If a few more months passed, these would most likely be gone as well. There was some bile threatening to emerge from his gut. Patrick felt hot, angry, and humiliated. He had the temptation to yell and lash out at his wife, but he restrained it. Instead, he closed his eyes. He remembered the emotional control strategies he had learned from his therapist. In instances like these, he remembered his aspirations for 2021 and the progress he had achieved. One of those objectives was to work on himself to improve his self-care, confidence, and self-esteem. He couldn't heal while still angry about his wife's infidelity. He could no longer let it have control over him. He needed to let it go. "I'm unaffected by anything Kendra does. I am on my own. I am free." For the past few weeks, it has been rather easy to let go of Kendra. He'd scarcely considered her. He used to wake up every morning and all he saw was her. All day, the discomfort kept him awake. When he returned to bed, Kendra and Sean joined him. But lately, Kendra's picture hasn't made him depressed. She was far from his mind while he was at mixed martial arts class last week, after hiking and rock climbing with the guys he had met and befriended. Kendra had not even crossed his thoughts. Every night before going to bed, he did a few CrossFit exercises until he was exhausted enough to pass out. But in a matter of seconds, all of his progress was threatened. Kendra could see Patrick's mood had worsened. She did not want this to happen. She didn't want to jeopardize the preliminary peace agreement she'd reached with her ex-husband. Quickly returning her attention to their daughter, she stated, "You know, Jessie asked me to go out and buy her a brand new dress so she can look good for you, as she had intended." The picture of their daughter soothed him. His face relaxed. He noticed what Kendra was doing and welcomed the change of conversation. When his eyes opened and he gazed at her, he no longer felt angry. He even managed to show a little smile on his face. "Oh, seriously?" Patrick asked with a pleasant smile. "Oh, yes. It took us 3 hours of shopping to find anything she loved. You'd assume she was off to the prom. At least I won't have to confront you about your intentions for my daughter." Patrick grinned. "So, Mommy, I guarantee my intentions for your daughter are quite obvious. We are going on our Father's Day date, have dinner at a fancy restaurant, and go for a walk. I'll get her back by midnight and treat her like a genuine woman." Kendra squinted her eyes as she said, "You better do it. If you don't, I'll bring her father after you. And let me tell you, he is quite protective of his daughter." They both laughed heartily. Kendra felt relieved that the situation hadn't turned into a scandal. She also had a sudden burst of envy. Patrick hadn't taken her on a date since his brother's death over 5 years ago. She wished he'd put on a blazer and take her to a restaurant. Instead, she watched him become depressed while all he wanted to do was eat, sleep, and play video games. Kendra sat down on the couch, gesturing for him to join her. He took a seat, although at the opposite end. They turned to face one another, their feet pointed toward the center. Kendra crossed her slim legs and the hem of her sundress raised slightly over her creamy thighs. Nothing blatant or indecent, but enough to remind Patrick that his wife, whom he had decided to leave, was still beautiful. He couldn't take his eyes away from the scene. Kendra saw that while she didn't intend to showcase herself, she wasn't bothered by she realized she was still lovely. Men hit on her all the time, including ones over 10 years younger. However, over the last few years, her spouse appeared to be resistant to her beauty. He did not want to ask her out. "I didn't want to spend any time with her, let alone fuck her." After pleading for his attention for so long, she had finally accepted the fact that Patrick had lost interest in her. She leaned back on the cushion and carelessly stroked her long, silky legs together like a seductive cricket. Not only did this action produce a sensuous, rustling sound, but it also encouraged him to elevate somewhat further. A foot in a sandal dangled in the air, displaying her 2-day-old pedicure. Patrick had 2 hidden fetishes, legs and feet. His, if you will. Nobody except her knew that about her husband, and she remembered that he was particularly fond of them. Patrick had to force himself to turn aside, resisting the seething, nostalgic lust that was threatening to break loose. Unlike Kendra, he had not had sex throughout their absence. He didn't have the option of taking a side trip after their separation agreement was signed. At one point, the impulses challenged his sanity. Thoughts of sex inevitably brought to mind his wife, and he imagined how she had sex. Anger? Yes. Sadness? Sure. Excitement? Surprisingly. Also, yes. It was confusing. The notion of her having sex with Sean triggered his memories. He remembered how she had been in bed before the depression hit him hard. He and his wife had an extremely active sex life. Kendra's libido had always been higher than his. She introduced him to the more daring side of sex. So imagining her in the depths of passion, knowing exactly what she was capable of, was a huge turn-on. The turning point was New Year's Eve. That night, he was about to end it all. With one hand, he clutched a scotch bottle in one hand and a sharp razor in the other. Hours before making the mistake, he sat in his modest living room, building his confidence to do it. He did not want to see 2021, not with this terrible depression holding his heart. Every time he pressed the razor blade to his wrist, his daughter's face appeared. He watched her laughing, playing, and saying she loved him. These images caused him to lower the blade as if on purpose. At 11:59 p.m., his phone rang, informing him that a text message had arrived. Picking it up, he discovered that it was from Jesse. "Happy New Year, finest father in the world." Patrick broke down. Years of sorrow flowed from him for his brother, wife, marriage, and daughter. He lamented everything altogether. His cries were so strong that he curled up in a fetal posture on the lonely carpeting in his living room. He cried so much that he fell asleep with tears on his face. The next morning, he awoke with a tremendous hangover and a fresh clarity, looking at the blade and realizing what he had almost done. He realized that he could no longer do it alone. He needed aid. He needed to speak. He could not be alone. Warrior in the field for himself. So he did the most difficult thing he had ever done. He reached out for assistance. He called his sister. Even though it was humiliating, I told her everything. To her credit, she did listen. Even speaking caused him to feel lighter. Finally, pouring everything out made him feel less lonely. They talked for several hours. Eventually, she provided him the phone number for her therapist. It was the same therapist she had seen to deal with their brother's death. So far, 2021 has been a year of personal development for Patrick. Therapy had helped him confront his demons. Enrolling in a mixed martial arts school increased his confidence. The frenzy he has created over the last 6 months has helped him cope with his loneliness. The only thing he couldn't get past was the lack of sex. He had been a fan of a few industrious women online who assisted him on those rare evenings when his natural desires couldn't be resisted. But it was a half measure. However, the respite was just temporary. "So Patty," Kendra replied with a hint of flirting in her voice as she wiggled her foot. His look at her after all these years gave her confidence. "I don't recall the last time I saw you so dressed up." Patrick shrugged shyly, looking away from her. "Yes, I believe an older man can dress up a little." "You always look good," she remarked, not trying to hide her admiration for his makeover. "I would love to see you dressed like that when you ask me out." "Well, I've gone through a lot. I remember," Kendra replied, her gaze falling to the floor. The playful tone faded, giving way to grief. "I believe we've both been through hell. Before Before Patrick could stop himself, the words poured out of him. Yes, but I did not cheat. Kendra let out a sigh as his harsh words hit her. Her eyes gleamed. She was going to say something in response, but fate interrupted the conversation. They were interrupted by Jessie, who came magnificently into the living room and stood in front of her parents. "Daddy, I am ready." "Oh my God," Patrick exclaimed, gazing at this lovely girl. The last few stressful minutes with his wife vanished. "Look at you. I have to declare that you are without a doubt the most beautiful female on this world." Jessie sheepishly waved him away, chuckling. "Thank you, Daddy." Kendra witnessed this scene with tears in her eyes. She had to admit that she was apprehensive when Patrick first suggested taking his daughter out on a date for Father's Day. It sounded unusual at first, but the more Patrick discussed it, the more intrigued Kendra got by the idea. It was one of the sweetest things he could have thought of. Jessie goes on her first date with a man who expects nothing from her but to enjoy her company. She won't have to wonder if he likes her, if she eats strangely, or if he expects sex later. She'll see how a date should go and won't fall for some slick guy who says all the right things to get into her trousers. Kendra hoped that more fathers took their daughters out on dates. "Shall we?" Patrick asked, standing up. Jessie nodded, so Patrick extended his hand. Jessie grabbed it, and they made their way to the exit. Kendra followed them. As they went, she had the urgent need to photograph them. This was a special moment, and it would be a waste not to capture it. "Wait, do not leave yet," she yelled and dashed back into the living room, where her phone rested on the coffee table. When she got back, she launched the camera app. "Smile," she said. Patrick wrapped his arm around his daughter's shoulders and pulled her to him, her arm wrapped around his waist. And her head rested on his shoulder. Then they smiled broadly at the camera. That became the photo Kendra took. Several moments later, she leaned against the front door frame, watching them walk to his car like true gentlemen. Patrick opened the passenger door so Jessie could enter, then dashed over to the driver's seat. "Have fun!" she shouted and waved goodbye to them. They both waved back as the automobile moved out the driveway. Then they vanished. Kendra sighed and closed the door as she upped the stairs to her bedroom. Kendra was still looking at the picture when her phone rang. When she realized it was Sean calling, she grimaced and let the phone ring twice, then 3 times. She almost didn't pick it up, but she eventually did. "What is the problem, Sean?" she inquired, not concealing the little trace of annoyance in her voice. "I'm just calling to check on you. I haven't heard from you for a long. I wanted to be sure you were still alive." Then, with a sarcastic dryness in his voice, he added, "At least your phone is still working." Rolling her eyes, she groaned and asked, "What happened to letting me be alone?" Sean snorted harshly. "I gave you 2 weeks, Kendra, no phone calls or texts. How much more time do you have to spend without me?" "I'm not sure, but it's more than I've had thus far." There was a pause between them. Sean bit his lip deliberately, battling the feelings that bubbled up inside him. He couldn't ignore the idea that there was something else going on here, something Kendra refused to admit to. One question hung in the air. They both knew the answer, even if they tried to evade it. Sean swallowed and eventually asked Kendra, "Do you still love me?" "What's the answer?" A melancholy sigh. That was it. However, it did not require anything extra. That sigh spoke volumes. Sean had several things he wanted to express. He wanted to scream and yell, angry at the 3 years he'd wasted on her, the emotional turmoil he'd gone through, and the sound advice he'd ignored from family and trusted friends, who warned him not to get involved with a married woman, no matter how tenuous her marriage is or how frequently she professes her love for you. She will never truly be yours, since she is still half his. That's what his uncle told him in his thinking. Sean knew he should listen to those words, but his heart disagreed. He and Kendra should be distinct. They should be an exception. They should do it. But here he was, devastated and rejected. That's how her spouse must have felt. He wanted to be the victim in this scenario, but he wasn't. "You know what, Kendra? Screw you. You can be alone as long as you wish. I'm out of here." With those comments, Sean hung up the phone for the final time. Kendra listened to the deadline for a few seconds. Half of her wanted to call him back and tell him whatever he wanted to hear, just to make him feel better. But she realized it would be far crueler than making him believe she felt nothing. She gently tossed the phone onto the mattress beside her before pulling her knees up to her chest, hugging them and crying. How did her life get to this point? How would she get here? 5 years ago, she was blissfully married. She lived in a modest but decent house with her husband and daughter. They were financially secure, had a satisfying sexual life, and were adored by their friends. These recollections clashed with subsequent ones in which she and Sean celebrated her newfound independence from her marriage. It was not simple for her to date her sweetheart, while Patrick's oppressive presence hovered in the background. The secrecy compelled them to be discreet in their acts. They only had a few opportunities to meet in person. Their passion had to flourish under the shadows of texting and video conversations, as terrifying as the moment was. It was also the hottest they'd ever been together. Kendra felt like a teenager again, sneaking away from her parents to capture a forbidden moment. These private experiences were valuable because they were so rare. When they finally met after weeks of date preparation, their loins were boiling with desire for each other. Boom, fireworks, an explosion, the eruption, sweaty, animalistic, and vulgar. Sex wherever possible, in his car, in a remote part of the park. Those butterflies, those wonderful endorphin-charged emotions were nearly indistinguishable from reality. Just thinking about Sean made Kendra wet his eyes, smile, and move his hands like he was enthusiastic about something. All of this made her long for the next time she could meet him face to face, but she hadn't realized Sean was an ice cream man. Kendra, like any other child on the earth, used to like ice cream. She would have eaten it all day if her mother had let her. But there were sad laws that stood between her and her reward, such as eating the vegetables first or taking only 2 spoonfuls. She frequently felt awful about being denied something she genuinely enjoyed. A child's sore throat was acute after having her tonsils removed. When she was permitted to consume as much ice cream as she could, the suffering was worth it. Or so she thought. She quickly became bored with the flavor of the ice cream. As soon as she was completely satisfied, old familiar smells tempted her. The aroma of fried pork chops, pasta and cheese, and even cooking veggies. It was torture. She had finally received what she had wanted for so long, but the cost was higher than she had anticipated. Even now, the taste of ice cream reminded her of sitting on the couch as her family ate it without her. That's how she felt right then, as she watched her husband take their daughter on a date. It was intended to be a family meal for 3. She noticed her husband sitting at the table across from their lovely daughter. She noticed Jessie roll her eyes as Patrick failed to impress her with one of his dumb jokes. Patrick was the master of corny jokes. She once thought it endearing, then she got annoyed when he stopped making jokes. She was looking for someone who could make her laugh and roll her eyes at the same time. Kendra recalls one Valentine's Day when the two of them went out to supper. He had purchased her a new clothing for the occasion. As she slipped it on and stood in front of the mirror, she smirked, recognizing why he'd bought it. The cleavage was obviously evident. He had been secretly staring at her breasts the entire evening. At one point she said, "Hey, mister, my eyes are here." This inspired him to tell her the most insignificant yet nonetheless popular joke. "Which bees offer milk instead of honey?" he asked her. She didn't have to ask for the punchline because he smirked and answered his own question. Wrong bees. Her tears gushed. Sitting on that bed, she sobbed for herself, her husband, her kid, and for destroying the love of 2 amazing men. She wished she could go back in time and have Patrick tell her another dumb joke. The story of Jack and Lauren is a journey full of pain, yet it carries profound lessons about trust, betrayal, and the strength to change. When faced with the harsh truth, Jack had to confront a heartbreak no one could have foreseen. But through each step, he rediscovered himself, even though the road was far from easy. Life doesn't always go the way we want, but what matters is how we overcome it. Betrayal, no matter how painful, cannot break us forever. Sometimes the greatest shocks are opportunities for us to reevaluate life, to find peace within ourselves. Jack chose the difficult path, but it was the path that led to freedom. Freedom from lies, freedom from injustice. Rising after a fall requires immense courage and resilience. And Jack's story is not just about a man betrayed, but it's a story for all those who are fighting through struggles in life. Everyone can find a part of themselves in this story, a part that we must face, accept, and overcome. If Jack's story has touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel to continue following more inspiring and meaningful stories. Share your thoughts and emotions with us, and make sure to click the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in our next videos, where we will explore even more valuable life lessons together.